All right. Saying something, testing the microphone. Is it loud enough to hear me? Is it okay volume wise, Tanya? Is it loud enough? Can you hear me? Well, that's fine. Just not every single word. I have no idea if Brock's coming down. I wasn't here. All right. It is 2 minutes to 2. Hi, Brock. A lot of people have already had this one. They've been working on it for quite some time, going to camp meeting and such. All right. All right. So we're going to have a prayer to get started here. So let's bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day you've given us, for this opportunity to come together as Pathfinder leaders to learn more about how to lead your young people closer to you. We pray that you'll be with us this afternoon, help us to gain the blessings you have for us. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Okay, so for all of you, a couple announcements to start it off. If you weren't here last night, Matt had car troubles and is zooming in, so there is no mini screen. It'll either be Matt's beautiful face or the TV up here. So we'll try to make sure we keep the screen up long enough for those online taking notes. So a couple announcements. First off, I talked to Pastor Harris yesterday for those interested in getting their master guide at Gillette. The process for Gillette is you have to either contact your area coordinator or Pastor Harris to get the last signature on your master guide card saying that you finished everything. Once you've done that, then they will let the conference know so they can order the pins and everything. And then you have to let Pastor Harris or the area coordinator know that you're planning on going for Gillette. Then you need to go on the camporee.org website and under, if I can find my mouse, where did it go? There it is. Under information, down here under the scoop, there's forms, applications, and documents. Once you get down to there, this is the page that pulls up all the way down here towards the bottom. Where did it go? Right here. Where's my mouse? It's coming off of the... So there's the Master Guide investiture form here. This is the certificate that you guys will be getting. There's the commemorative pin. So you scroll down to here to the Master Guide registration form. This lets the camporee people in charge know that you plan on getting invested there. You can either do this by the club with the club director. It will let you do up to 3 people per form. So if you only have 2 or 3, you can only do the one. You can do just the one form if you want to as a club, but it lets them know the names so they know who's going. If you register before June 1st, the commemorative pin and the document or the plaque thing is free. If you wait till after June 2nd, it's $10, and you'll be able to pick them up at the Advent Source booth when we get to Gillette. So it's like we have the normal Master Guide pin. It's just the little octagon shape. They have one that's specific to every international camporee, that it's got something to do with the logo, and it's a little bit fancier, that says that you got invested at the big international camporee. So it's just a little special something. But yeah, so you'll get the plaque and the commemorative pin here. You can do it, the last date is August 3rd to get registered, period, through the campsite website here. But if you do it before June 1st, the pin and the plaque is free. Otherwise, it's $10. So, but yeah, you have to talk to an area coordinator or Pastor Harris to get the last signature, and they'll check over your portfolios. And then you have to let them know that you plan on getting invested at Gillette. And then you've got to come on the website, go to the forms, documents, and applications, go down to Master Guide, fill out the form, and then you're good to go. So we just want to make sure that everybody's planning for Gillette is taken care of here. So, and if you guys haven't actually gone through this website, there is an insane amount of info under everything. So, okay, well, then I'm going to get the screen switched back over, and we are going to kick this off.
All right, so you're going to have to excuse me. I'm going to be clearing my throat and coughing quite a bit. I'm still trying to figure out what's going on with my throat. So you'll have to bear with me. But we'll get started here with our first. The first one is Christian leadership. So we'll get going right into it. So what does it mean? So you know by now that I really enjoy looking at the actual meaning of words. So the first one is Christian. So a Christian is a person who follows the teachings of Jesus Christ. And leadership is influencing other people to follow. So that is, Christian leadership is, here just a second, influencing other people to follow the teachings of Jesus Christ. So Christ is our example. So what kind of a leader was Christ? He was patient, kind, loving, gentle, familiar. And does this sound familiar at all to anybody? It is the fruits of the Spirit, Galatians 5:22 and 23. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faithfulness, meekness, temperance, and against such there is no law. Christ was and still is a servant leader. So then we go into another one. What is a servant leader? So a servant is a person who performs duties for others, especially a person employed in a house on domestic duties or as a personal attendant. And we can liken that to a sergeant in the military. So the role of a sergeant in the military is to oversee soldiers in their daily tasks, and are expected to set a standard for lower ranked soldiers to live up to. And that's what it sounds a lot like to me. Now I know we're not military, we're Pathfinders, we're not even paramilitary. And that's something that the Pathfinder program has tried to avoid. But there's definitely lessons to be learned everywhere if you merely look. So it's interesting there if you look at the way servant is spelled and the way sergeant is spelled. it kind of looks very similar. And I've always wondered why sergeant was spelled so weird, because the way you say it definitely does not look the way it's, the way it's spelled doesn't look the way it sounds. And so I just, when I was looking at this servant leader, I happened to see that and I thought, wow, that really is interesting, that correlation between sergeant and servant. But then we also look at the fact that we are called to be Christian soldiers. So when you look at the hierarchy of the military on the next slide, you're going to see a pyramid. Okay, at the very top you have your generals, and yeah, when you look at a picture of the the list of generals and all the people that are still actively generals, there's a lot of them, but there are far more people as you go down that pyramid. So you have your generals, your colonels, and then I put officers just because I'm not going to go through all the ranks. But your general is over a lot of people. Your colonel can be over a base, or even, sorry, excuse me, over a field unit. But then you have your different officers that are tasked with different jobs throughout the military. And then you have your NCOs, your non-commissioned officers, like your corporals and your sergeants. And I know the Navy has different names for them, but they're all the same ranking. And then you have at the very bottom your enlisted. So this is the order of importance and operation as far as the military. But Pathfinders has a slightly different setup. In the next slide, we have an upside down triangle. And this is the level of importance. We're here to serve our Pathfinders. We are servant leaders. So our Pathfinders are at the very top. They make up the largest demographic. Then we have our staff members and our TLTs. The reason I put the TLTs with our staff members is because they are staff. That's why they come to our staff meetings. They have just as much say as other staff members. They are teens in training for leadership. And then we have our director and our deputy who help the staff members, help the Pathfinders. And then the director, if they're lost and need some help, they can go to either other directors or area coordinators. They are a resource for us to go to as directors if we have any questions. I know down in my area, I work with the Hillsdale Club a lot, and our area coordinator is Bob Fenwick. And the coordinators for Grand Rapids are the Frains and Sergio Gill. And then if they can't answer our questions or unable to help, we can always go to the conference director. So our system of servant leadership is the conference director helps the area coordinators, who helps us as directors and deputies and staff members help the Pathfinders. So now we're going to look real closely into Pathfinder leadership. Now, if you look at how Pathfinders, us as leaders in the Pathfinder program, Pathfinder leadership is Christian leadership. So for example, a classwork comes in at Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. So that is our real goal, is to train up these children in the way they should go. We should be helping them build a better relationship with Christ and be pointing them towards Christ. Now our honors come in with Ecclesiastes 10:18. By much slothfulness, excuse me, by much slothfulness the building decayeth, and through idleness of the hands the house droppeth through. So we have our classwork that focuses on the relationship aspect of our walk, and our honors give us hobbies and things we can do, and introduces people to a lot of not only hobbies but potential life careers. I know at one point I had gone through the welding honor, and about 2 years into my marriage, I got a job as a welder in a factory. So I took the skills I learned in Pathfinders and turned it into a job to support my family. So this was a really, really short one. I know there wasn't a whole lot to cover. They give you a category of Christian leadership, and I get to just talk about leadership as a Christian. So do we have any questions that I could answer while we're right here? Okay. All right. So why don't we take a 15-minute break and just get up, stretch your legs, get some water, and then we'll come back in at 2:30, and we'll hit the next one. If we keep going quickly through these, then we might get out a little earlier, which I don't think anybody would complain about. All right, so I'll see y'all back at 2:30. I just Okay, our next category is discipline and discipleship. Now, discipline is a very difficult thing to work with as a Pathfinder leader, not only disciplining the young people, but also sometimes discipline for our staff is unfortunately necessary, and that's a very difficult thing to deal with, especially as a director or a deputy director. So we'll get started on it, and we're going to again look at the meanings of words. So the first one is discipline. That is the practice of training people to obey rules or a code of behavior using punishment to correct disobedience. Now, discipleship is a state of following the teachings or life and aim of another. So the root of the word discipleship is disciple, which means someone who follows the teachings, life, and aim of another until the person becomes like the master. So that's where we get the meaning of we should be disciples and we should have work with other people and they be our disciples as well. But that's kind of that's a hard word to look at as master. Yeah, we're working on the master guide program and we are going to become master guides, but that's kind of an interesting word to have because it kind of denotes a little bit of pride almost. So let's actually dig into that word and um, let's make it not such a negative word here. So our next slide, we're going to start with the word master. Master is a person in charge of an organization or group. Excuse me. So in what ways am I a master? Now I could list off a bunch of things and I have those here written on the screen, but I'd like you guys to take a moment and I will stop talking for a moment to let you guys think about in what ways are you a master? Okay, so like in mine, we have I'm a driver trainer. I went through enough training and I have the skill set to where when I was driving for a different company, I was given the title of a driver trainer. And when they had new drivers come in, they would send me out with them to make sure they were ready to. Um, okay, question.
I think, there's many different ways you can look at. Okay. There's many different ways you can look at how you are a master. I think I like the biblical and the Jewish way because they looked at their elders as the most wisdom enriched people. So you're learning from experience. That means you're not a master because you're proud. You're a master because you've learned from your failures and you have wisdom to dispense to those who are coming along in life.
Right.
Or in a given sphere. And in the case
Right,
of,
and that's
yeah,
go ahead.
There can be specific things like, Brock's a dentist, so he could really teach us quite a bit about dentistry. But, as far as life goes, when you're a leader in the spiritual walk, it's a lot of experience of walking with Jesus. And that's what we're doing in Pathfinders, with kids.
Right. And that's what the key is to looking at the meaning of the word master. right there as a person in charge of the group or organization. It's not so much that we're the best at something, but we have was that? Okay, we have the skill set that makes it so that, like you said, we have the experience to where we can now teach what we've learned through our training. So that's, the biggest one for me is being a father. Obviously, we have mothers, grandmothers. There's always something we can teach based on our experience level. I'm a business owner, so I can work with people on how to get their business started. I'm a master guide, so one of the things I do is I teach this program. Being a PIA gives me the ability to teach other programs, like I mentioned last night. But something we have to avoid as youth leaders is pride. Now, growing up in the Adventist church, I'm actually a fourth generation Adventist. So I've heard all the things about pride, and pride goeth before a fall, like there in Proverbs 16:18. Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. So I've always kind of wondered, how can I do something like fix my car? Because, you guys, Brennan mentioned my car is broken. I got a torsion bar that broke, and I got to get it off the car and get it welded and put back on the car. Well, being able to do that gives me a sense of pride, a feeling of accomplishment. So that's a good feeling. And I was having a hard time personally looking at the Bible saying that pride goeth before destruction. But it's got to be a good thing to have satisfaction in what you've done in that sense of pride. So I went back and I looked up the Hebrew meanings that were used in these verses. So when you look at the Hebrew word used here in Proverbs, I may butcher the pronunciation of this, but it's right there on the screen, the Gia, which means pride, haughtiness, boastfulness, arrogance, conceit. So that would be the kind of thing where if I was going around touting my accomplishments with how I fixed my car and all this kind of stuff, that would be that kind of pride that Proverbs talks about. But another form of pride, another word that is translated to pride, I should say, from the Hebrew is nachas, which is pride or joy, typically referring to the pride or joy that a child brings a parent. And being a parent, I can understand that. My daughter just got her certificate for being on the honor roll, and I was extremely proud of her for that. And that's a great sense of pride and joy. So I've been able to separate the haughty spirit from the healthy kind of pride that we need to have, not only in our kids and our pathfinders, but in ourselves. There's nothing wrong with being proud of me, like that list says, being a driver trainer. I mean, I'm proud of my accomplishments. I've done the work, I've put in the time, and I hold that title with pride. Master Guide, I wear my Master Guide uniform and scarf with pride. Not the haughtiness. I don't walk around saying I'm better than anybody else because I'm Master Guide, PIA, any of that. But it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with servant leadership. Yes, okay, question.
Hey, Matt.
Yep.
Oh. Okay. Hey, Matt. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I had a quick question on being a master. When we're defining, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you. Go ahead.
When we're defining what ways we're a master, what about when the Bible indicates that we all have talents or gifts that God has given us? What about being those as the state of a not an actual, let's say, title in a way, but a talent that God has given you to use to lead others to Christ. So would using your talents or gifts from the Holy Spirit be considered a master, what's definition? Is like, what am I a master of?
So that's a really great question. And actually, when you become a master, it is because you've worked at your craft. So if you're skilled in mechanical, so like for me, I can do a lot of mechanical work. I do a lot of repairs on my own vehicles. And so God has given me the talent of being mechanically minded and being able to understand mechanical things. So now I took that foundation and practiced and worked at it and developed that skill to where I'm not a master technician by any stretch of the imagination, but I can save myself and my family a great deal of money by doing a lot of repairs myself. Even on my semi truck, I can do that. So the skills that and talents that God has given us is our foundation, and He's asked us to take those talents and grow them. And as we develop those and get better at those talents and those skills, we become masters and are able then to teach that to others. Did that answer your question all right? All right, so so we'll go on to the next slide here of responsibility. Now, as a master, as a leader, we have a responsibility to our people that we are in charge of as leaders and masters. So I also went back because I'm also military minded. I can think along those lines really well. So I went back and saw in the Marines there is a first sergeant or a master sergeant, and that person serves as the senior enlisted Marine in the company, assisting in their unit's discipline, administration, morale, and Marine welfare matters. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that sounds an awful lot like the role of a master guide in the Pathfinder program. We're the ones that we're pretty much the senior Pathfinders in our clubs. Granted, the director has the authority granted by the church board, but as master guides, we have the training to be the lead and the most knowledgeable in assisting our unit in discipline. And we know how to work with the administration of our club. We've learned about the keeping up the morale of our Pathfinder program. We talked a little bit about that last night with staying enthusiastic and excited about the program and what we're doing each and every meeting. And welfare matters. That's something we have to really take into consideration, like we talked about again last night, was if we're paying attention to our Pathfinders and we notice that Tommy is normally very rambunctious and excited and hard to manage and, for lack of a better term, control. And then he comes in one day and he's just down and not feeling well. That's going to cue us into, we need to check in on this. Maybe he's got a medical thing going on. Maybe something's going on at home. Maybe there's something we can do to help. So we are, as master guides, we're constantly looking out for the welfare of our Pathfinders. Now, as master guides, we do not usurp the director. We help the director. It helps to have the director be a master guide. I know Pastor Harris will encourage all of his directors to become master guides. It doesn't mean you have to be a master guide to become a director, but he strongly encourages you to work towards that as a director because it gives you this experience to draw off of in this knowledge. And when we look at the scope of our responsibility is pathfinders are our disciples. So we are the ones that are trying to lead them to Christ. We're trying to teach them. That's the TLT program. We take pathfinders, teach them to teach other pathfinders, and they become staff members. So our responsibility goes beyond just the care of our pathfinders. It's teaching the next generation. Brandon and I are examples of that. He and I both came up through the Pathfinder program. Actually, he started in adventures. He started right down with Eager Beaver. I didn't come in until my friend year with Pathfinders, but we both grew up in it, got our master guides, and I went on to do the LA and the IA before that was done away with. And so now he and I are both directors and we're doing this program. So it's kind of come full circle is the generation before us did what they were supposed to do and they fulfilled their responsibility. And now the next generation, Brenda and I are leading out in programs, and you see a lot of young directors out and around. If you remember from the fair and the camporees, you're going to see a lot of younger. What was that? There's 17, Brandon's telling me in my ear, there are 17 Pathfinder directors that are in their first 2 years. So we have a lot of our younger generation doing the next thing. So what do our disciples need in the next slide? They need to be able to look up to us. So not only, it's kind of easy. I stand at 6'5", so it's easy for a lot of people to physically look up to me, but that's not what we mean. We need to be an example for them to look up to. So if we're living by the Pathfinder pledge and law, that's something that they can look up to. As they see us participating and having a good time, enjoying Pathfinders, getting involved, watching Brandon run around the field playing with everybody, and the camp out we had, they really see that and they look up to that. And that's why we have so many young directors. Is when we were kids, it was a thing where I saw my dad very much involved, and so I became involved and I wanted to get into it, and here I am teaching this. Brandon got to see his leaders being super involved and excited about the program. Now he's a director, and so our Pathfinders are going to be looking up to us, so we need to show them the full enjoyment of the Pathfinder program. We also need to exercise the fruits of the Spirit. So our Pathfinders need us to be fair and patient and kind and considerate and long-suffering. I know we had, when I was just talking about Tommy, he needed long-suffering. He had some behavioral issues, and it was a challenge to keep him in line, but he definitely exercised my long-suffering fruit of the Spirit. Our disciples need structure. Excuse me. They need the structure of the Pathfinder program. We have the advantage of having the Pathfinder program already set up for us with a great deal of structure. And we just need to follow the program mostly as it's written. Obviously, it gives us a license to make the program our own and work with it the way that works best for us. But our Pathfinders, our disciples, even our kids, they need structure to cling to. They need that discipline as much as they fight against it. They long for it and they need it. They need clear and fair consequences and rewards. So one thing I grew up with was a curfew. So we would go to the fair and the camporee, and there would be a point in time where we could run around and hang out with our friends. And there was a free time there in the evening. And I think they still have that. And my dad would say, okay, all right, you go out and have fun, talk to your friends, whatever, but be back by this time so that we can go on to the next thing. And he would let us know ahead of time, okay, here's, if you're not back the first time, your first offense is you have to stay within sight of me. So that means when it came to going anywhere, he had to, and he had to be able to see me. So if I had to go to the bathroom, I had to let him know, and he had to follow me down to the bathroom because I had to stay within sight of him. And that was the rest of the weekend. If I left his sight and he was not able to look up and find me within a reasonable amount of time, um, he would say, okay, that's strike two. Strike two was you were his buddy. It means you sat right next to him and you didn't go anywhere without him. Like you sat right next to him in the meetings. You couldn't go sit with your friends. You sat right next to him, walked right next to him. Everything was right next to him. And so there was very clear consequences to our actions. Um, and the other thing is to follow through. I got the first one. I want to say it was my friend year. I came back late. I was 5 minutes late, and I spent the rest of the weekend uh, within within eyesight of my dad, and it was no fun. And I never did again. But other kids learned from watching my mistake. And one particular time I remember was I was back about 10 minutes early, and we had about 2 or 3 kids that were still out that were straggling in. And about 1 minute to the time they had to be there, 1 minute left, he looked down the road. And Dad was standing out there with his, standing out there with his watch, and he's looking down the road. He was looking at his watch, and Jordan comes running down the road as fast as he can run. And Dad's standing there with his great big smile on his face, looking at his watch, looking down the road. And Jordan is flying down the road as fast as he can run. And he dives, like full body dives into the campsite as the clock ticks over to the time he had to be back. He rolls on the ground, looks up at my dad, and he's like, just made it. So everybody learned real quick that you don't question it. It was, if Dad said that was going to be a consequence, he was going to follow through on it. And then our last need that our disciples have is spiritual counseling. Being that this is a Christ-focused program, spiritual counseling, unfortunately, these days falls on church members, church leaders, Sabbath school leaders, Pathfinder leaders. A lot of people these days are not really focusing on the spiritual aspect of our young people. And so as parents, we're responsible for fostering that. But we're going to see a lot of Pathfinders coming in, especially from the community that have little to no experience with religion other than the twice a year Christians that go to Easter or Christmas. And we're going to be about the only ones that are really fostering that spiritual aspect of their lives. So as master guides, we have the training and the experience to work with our disciples in the spiritual counseling area. So let's really dig into discipline. This is the hard part of the pathfinding program. So our next slide has Job 36, 9 to 11. Excuse me. Then he showeth them their work and their transgressions that they have exceeded. He openeth also their ear to discipline, and commandeth that they return from iniquity. If they obey and serve him, they shall spend their days in prosperity and their years in pleasure. So we need to always keep in mind the fruits of the Spirit. And this is where I'm talking like with Tommy and the long suffering, patient, kind. We need to always exercise the fruits of the Spirit. Sometimes we need to get their attention. Um, Generally speaking, you can go up and tap them on the shoulder and get their attention that way. You really don't want to draw a crowd or create a scene. Sometimes you have to get their attention quickly. So, one technique that I use because I have a lower, more commanding voice, I can just call their name. And Brandon has taught me that I have a third voice. So I have my talking normal to voice. I have my dad voice where my kids know when I say something and they know the different inflections and things. And then there's the military voice. The voice, what? Yeah, the military voice kind of lets people know that they're in the danger zone. They're going to be it's going to get their attention really fast, and they know that I'm the boss. I am not. I'm done with playing games. It's time to get serious. And then we need to show them their mistake. Now, we don't want to do this as a big display. We don't want to holler out, "Hey, Tommy," and then now everybody's looking at Tommy and trying to figure out why on earth he's in trouble getting yelled at. We might have to get his attention real fast, but then we just kind of wave him over and say, "Hey, come over here. I want to talk to you real quick." So we pull him aside. Now, we don't want to pull him into a separate room. We really have to be careful as leaders in this day and age where we just pull them aside where everybody can see us still. So there's no question as to any of the weird stuff that could happen. But we're still out of earshot of everybody. So we're helping them save face. And that's huge, not only for kids, but it works for adults as well. So I had an issue as a director where one of my staff members, I had to correct some behavior that the staff member was doing. He had just gone the transition from TLT to staff, so he was still learning. So I had to pull him aside, and granted, it was still within everybody could see, but I had to pull him aside and just say, "Okay, here's where you went wrong." And then I had to explain what the best method of rectifying it would be. And I gave him an opportunity to talk to me, tell me his side of things. And we had a discussion about it. And we left that conversation with not only having rectified the issue, but we both walked away with a deeper level of respect for each other. So the discussion is very important. And you'll see that this also ties into personal relationships like marriage relationships and relationships with friends and your own kids. If you follow the biblical example of discipline, where you, like there in Job 36, show their work and their transgressions, so call their attention to it. If you open his ear to discipline and command and return from iniquity. So that's when you're explaining what happened. Give them an opportunity to discuss it. And then if they turn it around, they'll spend their days in prosperity and their years in pleasure. And we need to, at the very end there, administer appropriate and timely punishment. We can't say that, "Oh, you messed up this camp out, so at the end of the year, you can't mess up at Camporee and be disciplined at the fair at the end of the year." That's just not going to work out very well. You're not going to get the point across. You have to discipline, especially young people, immediately with whatever predetermined discipline has been set out. So obviously when you, like we talked about last night, where you're setting out clear and concise expectations for pathfinders and staff, you also have to have in that very clear and concise um, repercussions for breaking those expectations. Um, and they have to be administered in a timely fashion. So, do we have any further questions regarding this particular topic? All right, so our next category is going to be child and youth evangelism. We'll do another 15-minute break, and then we'll come back at about 10 after 3. Thank you very much. got to get my. Okay. All right, so let's get back together here. We're about a minute behind, which is okay. And we're going to get started on our next category. I got to bring it up on my screen here, so give me a moment here. Child and youth evangelism. Now we know that a big part of Pathfinders is evangelism, and that's where we teach a lot of our social skills within the church is our evangelism program. So we'll get right into it. Child and youth evangelism within our church. So what are some ways that the church will evangelize to the youth? So there's Pathfinders, there's Adventurers, there's Sabbath School, there's Youth Group, there's the VBS programs, the kids programs during an evangelistic series. Men and Women's Ministries does actually work with a good, we'll put it this way, a good women's and men's ministries programs do also reach out to the young people of the church. The Junior Deacon and Junior Deaconess program, AV program, a lot of young people are involved with the audiovisual program within a church. The church school itself, and summer camp. These are all different ways that the church has developed, and I'm sure I've probably forgotten a few. There's obviously some room for more, but generally speaking, these are the ways that the church has developed a way to reach out to the young people, not only within the church, but within the surrounding community. So we're going to go on to the next slide of Pathfinder evangelism. So I'm going to go out on a very sturdy limb and say that Pathfinders is arguably the most important evangelism project in our church. And I know it's a pretty sturdy branch to be on because not only does everyone here agree with that, that's why we're in the program, but it has shown its effectiveness in our young people. I know we've mentioned the statistic before, but it bears repeating. I think it's the retention rate of young people in the church is about 25% without Pathfinders and 75% with the Pathfinder experience. And again, Brandon is an example of that. He went through his high school years and then spent a couple of years doing some college and then went off into the Navy. And the reason he came back, one of his testimonies, is he was invited by someone in the Virginia area to come back and help out with the youth program in the Adventist church, not knowing that Brandon was previously a Pathfinder. So he started working with Pathfinders in Virginia, and that brought him back into the church. And when he mustered out of the Navy, he came back to Michigan and found a home church, and they needed a Pathfinder director, and here he is with stars on his shoulders. So it is very much a statistic that is real and works. So the Pathfinder program, I would argue with anybody in the conference, anybody really anywhere in the world, that the Pathfinders is the most important evangelism project in our church. The Pathfinders teaches about Christ in many different ways. We have not only our classwork program, but all of our honors have a religious basis to it. I'm actually working on writing an honor right now. I'm trying to figure out how to make it's going to be a trucking honor where they're learning how to tie down loads on trailers and pack trailers and be able to tow a trailer, stuff like that. I'm trying to figure out the best way to incorporate a religious aspect to that honor. So that's still in the works, but I think it's a great feature to have in every single honor a religious tone of sorts. So we as Pathfinders, that is our focus, is to teach about Christ. Pathfinders also gives young people an opportunity to experience things they might not otherwise experience. So when I went to the Dominican on the mission trip, that's actually where I met my wife, as we both went on teen mission. And I got to be a part of the process during the medical clinic where the the person would come in and see a doctor, and I was essentially the attending nurse to the doctor's visit. And when we had the optical clinic, we were doing the scans for the eyes. That around here, the only people that do that is your optometrist. So we were running the machines to do the scans, and we were passing out prescription glasses. And when we did the dental clinic, I got to actually sit down and clean people's teeth like a hygienist. So things that you wouldn't normally do with in your real normal life, you're going to be able to do in Pathfinders. And yeah, there was sometimes that we got to pull teeth. And there's one particular time I was cleaning teeth, and as I was scraping it with the tool, a chunk fell out, and I called one of the staff members over. I said, "What do I do? Half this tooth just fell out." He said, "Well, there's nothing you really can do. Just keep going." So that was an eye-opening experience for me. It also, you can look at the honors. How many people are able to just go out and do maple syrup, maple sugaring honor? It takes a certain skill set and tools and equipment and know how to do that. And when you can bring someone that can do that in to teach that honor, that's an experience that most kids will never ever have again in the rest of their lives. But they've gotten that one rare experience that they'll never have again. Pathfinders also builds connections and lifelong friendships. So I keep going back to Brandon and I as examples. He and I have been friends through Pathfinders, and we're still friends. We run this together. He does a lot behind the scenes of this program, and today, this weekend especially, he's kind of doing double duty, being that I got stranded down here and I'm not able to be up there in person. He's really cracking on the background stuff, and he and I talk on the phone all the time, and we come up with ideas, and that's how this whole program came together. Was he and I are both truck drivers, and we have our headsets and we talk all the time while we're driving down the road. Another connection that I've seen happen more than once is my wife and I met in Pathfinders. We went to the teen mission together. We met on the orientation weekend, and she was 16 and I was 17, and we have been a part of each other's lives since then. I know of a couple other couples that got together through Pathfinders. So there are some unique opportunities for our Pathfinders to build these lifelong friendships and connections. Pathfinders also provides a Christ-focused extracurricular activity. That is huge in this day and age. We have schools that have extracurricular sports, all the things that are going on, but nothing is Christ-focused. Excuse me. And the Pathfinders program provides that opportunity for not only church-going young people, but their friends to come and get that experience of a Christ-focused program. A lot of churches will do a vacation Bible school, but that's only 1 week out of the year, whereas we run 10 months out of the year. We have a lot bigger reach. We have a longer time that we can reach people. We have a far more involved and extensive program to reach the young people in the community. And we also have the advantage of all kinds of incredibly fun programs and things to do. I know a lot of the kids, when asked, their favorite thing to do is the campouts and the games and the honors that are like, my son did blacksmithing at the Lake Union Campery, and he had a great time with that, and he wanted to build a forge here. And I told him we're going to have to wait until the finances said that we can build a forge. But he's all excited about that aspect, and that's because he was able to be a part of the Pathfinder program. Um, Pathfinders also teaches young people to be leaders. Not only the TLT program, we'll talk about that in a minute, but when you look at the Ranger curriculum, Ranger, Voyager, and Guide, part of their curriculum is to actually start working with and teaching the young people in the friend and companion classes. I remember when I was a Ranger, one of the things I had to do was teach part of the camping skills honor to the friend class. And so when we went up to the fort as a club, I brought in an extra tent, an extra sleeping bag, and that's what we did Sunday morning was we worked on camping skills. And I had to teach part of that program. So even without the TLT program, I was teaching but the younger people. And then when sorry, my son's in the background, he just came in with his buddies. When we get into the TLT program, that's when we really focus on teaching the teens different aspects of being a staff member. So one of the things they have to work on is paperwork and the administrative portion of running a Pathfinder club. So then they work with the director and the deputy, and they work on the finances, the budget, turning in paperwork, doing the reports, all the fiddly behind the scenes stuff that the directors have to deal with. They learn how to do that. And ideally, by the time they leave the TLT program, they're not only master guides, but they have learned everything that they really need to know about being a director and starting a club from scratch. That's really hard. I had to do that one time, but it can be done, and a good strong TLT program will equip our young people to do that. Pathfinders also provides a way for the young people to reach out to their friends. Excuse me. I know when we were at Pullman, we started out, I think we had 8 kids. And about 2 years later, we were at 20 because the kids were having such a great time, they would talk about it with their friends. It's not like we were telling them to bring their friends to the club. They would just go and talk about it. We'd talk about, yeah, hey, I did some welding and I got to put these 2 pieces together, and they actually brought stuff home that they could now show their friends. Or they had this really cool knot board that they had put together, and they were able to show what they were doing with the knot program. Or I know a lot of guys like to build fires. We're a little bit of a pyromaniacs that way. And we will build these cool fires, and maybe our friends like, well, how did you learn to do that? Oh, well, in Pathfinders, we learned how to build these different types of fires and these different kinds of shelters and all this. So it's just by word of mouth is the best advertising, and Pathfinders lends itself very beautifully to that. Another thing that Pathfinders provides for the kids is just plain fun. There's so many things to Pathfinders, and good leaders will be able to make even the most boring honors a little bit fun. Like, I keep going back to the knot honor being the most boring. There's required aspects to it for the classwork, and if you just go through the honor, it's covered for the classwork, but it's such a hard one to teach. And with a little bit of experience, because I've been teaching it since I was 16, so I've been doing it for a while. So when I was asked to do it at a staff workshop weekend, I kind of knew what I was doing, and I could work with it, and cracking jokes and telling personal stories. You can really turn something that potentially is very boring into something that could be fun. And it goes back to what we talked about last night with our own personal enthusiasm. If we keep an upbeat spirit, it's easier for everyone to keep an upbeat spirit. Can anybody else, we'll have an opportunity for the microphone to be passed around, and I'm kind of putting Brandon on the spot because the only way I can hear is through his phone. But is anybody else can tell me on the other ways that Pathfinders is a great evangelism program for our young people?
Hey, Matt. Again.
Hey,
So especially one of the expectations for some of the levels, the AI classes, of the Pathfinder supporting the church in events, especially for the evangelistic series, which the churches have. When there's the passing out the flyers in the community, to get people to come. So the evangelistic series, I think, is one of the biggest, not only for preparation for the evangelistic series in itself, but making it a mandatory Pathfinder evening night of the Pathfinders supporting the church in such an event. I think that's critical because yeah, after Matthew 28, we are to spread the news, and using Pathfinders to spread the news of the gospel is, I think, the biggest way that Pathfinders can be evangelistic.
yes, that is absolutely true. And one experience I had, going back to my time in Pathfinders, is when we were in Pullman, the Pullman Reflectors had did the seminars for an evangelistic series. The church members had nothing to do with it. The Pathfinder Club did everything from being greeters and working with the youth program to presenting the message to collecting offerings. Everything was done by the Pathfinders. And we actually took it out of the church building and we went to a circus tent that we had rented, and we put it right in downtown Pullman. And we still, to this day, had the greatest turnout of the community that the Pullman Church has ever had for any evangelistic series, to my knowledge. And that was because not only it was the young people doing the program, but we got it out of the church building. A lot of people are turned off by going to the church building for anything because they think once they walk in, they're going to get attacked and try to be converted. And there's all kinds of negative issues with people going to a church building. But also the novelty of kids presenting really kind of struck people. And people, how many times do you go to a kid's Christmas program and the seats are full? Yeah, it's a lot of family, parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles, but the seats are full because it's a kid's program. Kids generally will draw a crowd, especially when it's advertised that the seminar is presented by kids. So even if it's just for the show of support and the fact that they're kids, we have that unique advantage as Pathfinders to be able to reach more people in an evangelistic seminar. And I think that is a great example of Pathfinder specific evangelism that, again, goes back to the beginning of making it the most important project within the church. Are there any others?
Yes, hi, this is Tunisia. One thing that I would like to say is not only is Pathfinders great as an evangelistic tool for our youth to use for other people, like outside of the church, or even with their peers and their friends, but it is also great for personal evangelism as well, because it's like right within the Pathfinder law to keep the morning watch. And with my Voyagers this year, we haven't started, but we'll be looking at the 28 fundamental beliefs so that they can actually understand why are they a part of this church and what does the church believe. And so that is a call to them for their own personal evangelism, to keep up with their own spiritual walk.
Right. And I would argue that the best form of evangelism is living a Christian lifestyle. I could come up with a couple of different experiences I've had where just by existing, people notice the difference. And if we're teaching our Pathfinders like we should to keep the morning watch, like you had said, it's going to show in their personal life, and the people around them are going to notice. Not only the other kids that they hang out with, but adults will notice. I know that when my daughter goes and hangs out with her friends and spends the night at her friend's house, I know that those parents are also going to see the difference that my daughter has in her life because of the influence she's had from being taught how to have a relationship with Jesus. So yes, that personal evangelism is huge with Pathfinders, and it's especially potent for the Pathfinders to just, again, just to follow the Pathfinder law gives them the opportunity to witness to people just watching them exist. Do we have any other points, questions?
I noticed, this is Heidi Arms, I noticed
Hello.
a couple things that were beautiful to me in the concept of Pathfinders and the way it plays out. One is that it touches every one of the cycles, phases of evangelism. You know how Jesus mingled with the people as one who desired their good. And that's exactly what we're doing as leaders. And then as the kids grow up together, we're creating this circle of affinity. And it's a real long-term friendship evangelism, well-established relationships. And that's beautiful, which brings me to the other aspect. For kids, love is spelt T-I-M-E. Time.
Absolutely.
And they want, when somebody spends time with them, it communicates consciously and subconsciously, you matter. And to have a local church, to have a number of adults in that church think that they matter enough to spend this much time with them and do this many things with them, it communicates love on a level we don't really know.
Excuse me. Yes, you're
Which
absolutely
makes
right.
me think the whole concept of if we are to represent Christ to them, Pathfinders allows us as adults to practice what Jesus was, Emmanuel, God with us. We are being with them as adults.
Exactly. And where scripture will say that, let the little children come unto me. And that's our call to really hold them up and take the time. And I love what you said about time being a child's love language is spending time with them. As a father, that's been something that's been very clear to me. Granted, I've had to balance a lot with work, being a trucker and being away from home a lot. But as parents, we understand that our kids, just spending time with them means everything. There's a saying I'd seen, I think my wife had shown it to me, where if a kid brings you a stick or a leaf or a flower, you need to accept that with the absolute joy of them handing you the keys to a Lamborghini, because this is all they have, the best thing that they could find, the most beautiful flower, the coolest, sparkliest rock, and they chose you to give it to. So for our Pathfinders, especially, when they choose to come to the meetings and they're reminding their parents, hey, we got a Pathfinder meeting coming up this weekend. We need to be on time for that. That's them showing that they're enjoying their time in Pathfinders and that time spent is important to them. And by, like you said, the staff and the adults taking that time to teach them the cool new honors and the things that they won't get to experience otherwise is extremely important and actually life-changing for our young people. I can't agree more. Are there any others? Okay, so let's go on to the next one. Excuse me, our next slide, let me a chance. I need a little drink of water here. Okay, everyone is an evangelist. Okay, we kind of covered that a little bit with the basic pathfinders. You know, our friends through our guides. We have our club outreach. There is the evangelistic series that we talked about a minute ago. Talking to friends, that um, word of mouth advertising, if you will. That is a huge outreach for our pathfinders. Now, our TLTs, they're going to learn and practice Christian youth leadership, which, as we just talked about, is a huge, spending time with the young people is a huge ministry and evangelism. Um, and I remember when I was a friend, um, my friend instructor was a TLT. His name was Jason. And I looked up to Jason because Jason was really cool. And I actually ended up going to his wedding a few years later. And, but it was so cool that Jason was my instructor for my friend class. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to get into TLT, was because Jason was a good example of taking the time to work with the young people. Now, our instructors. Now, I would argue that our instructors are as important as the director, if not more important, because they're the ones that are working directly with our pathfinders, teaching the classwork, teaching the honors, and working with them one-on-one. You get to know them quite well, especially when you break it down into classwork groups. You could have one or two or three. Granted, the bigger clubs, you get 7, 8, 9, and PMC, you got like 20 per class. But you get to the opportunity to really get to know these kids, and you also have the opportunity to build that personal relationship with them, that you're going to pick up on the small changes where Tommy's normally rambunctious and today he's kind of subdued. You're going to pick up on that quicker than the director will, and you can either do something or draw attention to it to the director and the deputy, the counselor. You're going to be the one that has the most one-on-one time with the young people. Counselors, you're going to be working on building connections and providing a safe environment for our young people to reach out for help if needed. So if Tommy is willing to talk, he can go talk to one of the counselors and be able to say, yeah, things haven't been great at home. This and that what happened, and mom's stressed and dad's not been around lately. All the things that could go wrong. It's a safe space. I know it's kind of a buzzword, a buzz phrase right now, but it is a safe environment for our young people to be able to reach out. You're also going to be working with your unit. Now, when I was a kid, we had the boys unit, the girls unit, and we had one staff member who was the counselor that would oftentimes stay in the tent with the unit. It doesn't happen as much anymore because a lot of times we have married couples that are working as counselors, and they kind of tend to want to stay together on campouts and stuff. But that's also where TLTs come in, is if you give the TLTs the opportunity, excuse me, in their counselor rotation to work with the counselors in their units and stay in the tent with the kids. And so when you say, hey, lights out is at 10 o'clock, that's their TLT responsibility, is to work with the kids and say, all right, guys, it's time to quiet down. Let's settle in. And one thing I can't stress enough is give your TLTs a break. So when we went to the Lake Union Camporee, my daughter was a TLT at the time, and we kind of worked with her so the first half of the day, she was on duty. She worked with and stayed with her girls in her unit. And then halfway through the day, she would get to take a break and go hang out with her friends and do the things she wanted to do and have fun on her own time. And then come dinner time, she had to be back by a certain time. And then she was back on duty as a TLT. But we made sure she had that break in the middle so that she could still be an older Pathfinder and hang out with our older Pathfinder friends. But as a counselor, you are the one that's going to be really focusing on building those connections with your young people. So our deputy directors, were those, not enough can be said about a deputy director. As the right hand person for a director, you're the aide to the director. You are so in the situation we have right now with the Master Guide Club, I'm the director, Brandon's the deputy. He's doing all the behind the scenes stuff. I'm up here in front presenting, running these slideshows, building them, going through all the portion that the director's doing. But then, none of this would be possible, especially this weekend, without Brandon running around crazy, getting everything done all behind the scenes. So your deputy director is one of your biggest uh, aides and assistants in the Pathfinder program. I've seen Tanya and Jason pull some pretty interesting stuff for the Central Club and really help Brandon make things better for the club. And so, huge kudos to Tanya and, the years of experience that people have, and they come in as deputy director, having been director, Tanya and Jason, you guys have done a great job for Central, and I really appreciate what you guys have done. Um, and one of the things a deputy director can do is step up and be the director when, like Friday night at the camporee, there's always a director's meeting. So the director goes to the director's meeting and the deputy becomes the director at that point. So if the director has to miss a meeting because of a family emergency or something, the director knows the program. The director knows how to do, or the deputy knows how to do everything for the director, and it's usually a pretty simple and smooth transition for the deputy director to just step up. Our director leads and assists in the club in fulfilling its mission. And I think the key word there is assists, because yes, the director is the leader of the club, but as we go back to our pyramid, our upside down pyramid, the director helps the deputy, who helps the counselor, who helps the instructor, who helps the TLT, who helps the pathfinders. The director is like the biggest assistant in the club. And yes, we are the ones that are responsible for pulling our program together and making sure everyone has what they need. But we also have to realize that we're just a support system as a director. We're trying to make it the best program possible for our young people. Now, evangelism is only possible when paired with ministering. Now, ministering it's an interesting term that oftentimes is overlooked, the true meaning of it. So the next slide says, see a need, fill a need. I don't know how many of you have ever seen the movie Robots, but that was the underlying theme throughout the whole movie. And I really, really thought that was an incredible saying. When you see something that needs to be done, especially Pathfinders, we just go do it. We make it happen. If we see trash on the ground, we don't wait for someone else to pick it up. As Pathfinders, how many times have we been at a camp out and we're walking down the road and we see trash on the ground, we grab it and throw it away. Especially at the World Camper with all those little plastic baggies flying around from the pins. Not all the Pathfinders do what they're supposed to do and pick up their trash. And that's why we had so many problems, because I know when we first went to Oshkosh, the very first time, we actually got to see an air show. But because there was so much trash blowing out onto the airfield, that they stopped doing the air show after that because there was just so much trash. And so as Pathfinders, we see the need and we fill the need. So when we minister, the meaning of the word minister is to attend to the needs of someone. So as a pastor, as a minister, their job is to attend to the needs of the church members. As Pathfinder leaders, our job is to attend to the needs of our Pathfinders. Now, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I can't see a show of hands, but I'm sure everyone here at some point has heard of Maslow's hierarchy of need. But we will go over that in our next slide here. So at the bottom, we have our basic primal needs. We have sleep, food, water, bathroom breaks. And this is like our essentials to life, the things we absolutely have to have for life. Once those needs are met, we can then focus on the next layer, which is safety. So, security and safety of self and belongings, and predictability is important in the feeling of security and safety. If you can predict your schedule, you can get into a routine and you feel safe in your routine. So once you've gotten your basic needs met and you feel safe and secure in your house and your car and you have that sense of security, that's when you start looking into the next one being a sense of belonging, positive connections with family, friends, and staff. That is the biggest aspect of pathfinding. That's where Pathfinders comes in, is we give our young people a place to belong. That's also, excuse me, goes into the concept of the um, extracurricular activities. It gives them somewhere to kind of create a second family, if you will. How many kids? What? Yeah. So we have the unity that you come to find from like drill team and the drum corps. That Central loves their drum corps. Um, the How many times have we heard from kids that have gotten into gangs? The reason they became a gang member was because of that sense of family. Grown men go into motorcycle clubs like the Hells Angels because it is a sense of family that they may or may not have had growing up. So we all look for that sense of belonging. That's part of the reason why Brandon and I are both still Pathfinders, is that it's that sense of belonging that we have. We belong here, we belong being Pathfinders. So our next one, once we have a place of belonging, it's self-esteem, self-respect, respect of others, recognition of accomplishments. So that's when we need to start feeling good about ourselves as individuals. Self-love, if you will. That sense of pride that we were talking about earlier, of just joy, of satisfaction. That's what we're going to get in that next area. And then we go into self actualization. That's when we are completely filled up to the point where we can start exploring. We feel comfortable with going outside of our comfort zone now because we know we can go back to our comfort zone and be completely fine. We can go into learning and understanding and problem solving. Once we have completed that Maslow's hierarchy, we are then able to really do a lot of inventing, and our country shows that. So when our economy is doing better and people are not worried about their food, and they're at the very bottom of Maslow's list, when they're worried about being able to put food on the table and have enough money to pay the bills, keep the roof over their heads, people are not worried about making the latest, greatest invention. And so our technological advances fall off when our economy tanks because people go back to their hierarchy of needs. And that's why we see a lot of disconnect with like environmental groups. As people, especially as Christians, we do care very much about our environment. In fact, we have the saying of take only pictures and leave only footprints. And that's huge for Pathfinders because we do care about our environment.
We don't want to cut down the living trees unless it's absolutely necessary. There's enough dead stuff around that we can cut up for firewood. So as pathfinders, we do have an environmental um, need to protect. We have a need to protect our environment. But when you look at this hierarchy of needs, when we're worried about our food and our water and our safety, we're not worried about the environment. Like it's hard to get people to get on this environment bandwagon with the global warming and stuff when people are struggling to put food on the table. You can't expect people to jump to a part of the hierarchy of needs that they're not ready to be at yet. So in the Pathfinder program, especially our counselors and instructors, that's where we go to our belonging and our self-esteem. And you'll be able to see in your Pathfinders when they have met all those four layers of Maslow's needs, you'll see them come to that self-actualization, and you'll see them blossom. You'll see them come into their own, and you'll see them um, eventually take over their own clubs. So it's very important to understand that all people follow this, hierarchy of needs. And that is the way we are able to feel satisfied and that sense of joyful pride. So do we have any questions regarding this particular topic? No questions. So we will do another 15-minute break. That will put us back at about 10 after 4, and then we'll do our last seminar for today. All right, so welcome back. We're going to do our last segment here. This should get us out right about 5 o'clock, which I don't think anybody's going to complain about getting out about an hour early. So we're going to get started here on creating effective worships. So on our first slide, we're going to have planning. Planning is key when it comes to having your worships. I know when I was a kid, there was a lot of times no one had a worship ready, or someone that was supposed to didn't. So, as you know, staff kid, my dad would look at me and say, "Hey, go grab the book." And so I'd go grab the devotional book, and I'd have to read one of the devotionals out of the book, and it was very pieced together, not very well thought out, and so it was actually very ineffective. So planning is key for developing an effective worship. So in planning, you need to know your audience. And we're going to break each one of these down as we go. So this is just a quick overview of the planning process. So you need to know your audience. You need to know what your location is. Are you going to be using any kind of multimedia, like a slideshow or something? Is there a predetermined theme? Like, are you on a camp out and you have a theme that you have to stick to? You need to determine what level of involvement you want to have from your audience. You need to look at the topic. Are you going to be able to have enthusiasm about the topic and therefore be able to, like we had talked about earlier, be able to encourage enthusiasm into your audience? And you need to not only work on your preparation, especially with a multimedia, but you need to practice your worship presentation. So let's look at Psalm 66, 1 through 4, and let's see what the Bible says about worship. It says, "Make a joyful noise unto God, all ye lands. Sing forth the honor of his name. Make his praise glorious. Say unto God, how terrible art thou in thy works. Through the greatness of thy power shall thine enemies submit themselves unto thee. All the earth shall worship thee, and shall sing unto thee. They shall sing unto thy name, Selah." So let's go into the first category. Know your audience. Okay. We need to know what is the age group of your audience. That's going to be a huge determiner of your worship, how long it's going to be, the topics you can really cover in your worship. So we all know that in the children's story at church, you have 3 minutes, really, 2 to 3 minutes to tell your entire story. Otherwise, you've lost them. 5 minutes if it's really engaging and they're really into the story, like Pastor Harris does. So you have 2 to 5 minutes with the children's story age kids. Now, when you have Pathfinders, obviously you're starting at 10 or 11 years old. So you have 5 to maybe 7 minutes of attention time. And usually we try to keep our Pathfinder worships to about 10 minutes, 15, maybe 20 if there's singing involved. But you really want to keep your worship thought 5 to 10 minutes at most. You need to look at your group size. It's easy for Hillsdale to sit around the fire and have a worship because we have 2, 3 kids and 3 or 4 staff members. So it's easy for us to just sit around a club, like the campfire, and have a worship. But for Central to get around the fire, it's got to be a fire that has a 6-foot diameter and probably an 11-foot flame, and they're still kind of double deep. on getting around the fire. And if you go to PMC, well, you pretty much are meeting in the sanctuary because there's 100 kids. So you got to look at your group size and tailor your worship service to your group. You also need to look at your social influences. So obviously, we have Pathfinders, so there is some um, church influence there, but you also have kids coming in from the community that live on their phones, and um, they're very much in the entertainment business. And if things are not moving fast, you lose their interest. You don't have flashy pictures and um, lively, upbeat music. It's very hard to keep their attention. So you need to look at the social influences that your group is dealing with. And you need to do your research. So if you're going to present a worship topic, don't just grab a devotional book and start reading it. Maybe it's not, there's nothing wrong with reading out of a devotional book. But if you prepare ahead of time and read through it, you can do a little bit of research either into the topic or work on your voice inflections and the different ways of telling the story. Becoming familiar with the story is going to be helpful. If you're talking about a historic story, getting some of the information that's around the actual point you're trying to make could increase your enthusiasm to your topic, and it can also portray that your kids are going to have more enthusiasm for the topic. And then there's questions. If you do a historic topic, and one of the kids pops a hand up and asks a question, one, that's a great way to increase the amount of time you're going to have in your worship. But two, you kind of need to know about your topic outside of what you're actually saying, so that if a question were to arise, you could answer it. Kind of like what we do here. Um, Pathfinders has been my life since I was 10. I'm 36 now, so that's 26 years. So when you guys ask questions, I'm not only going back on my 26 years, but I have also had the opportunity to talk with most of our area coordinators and Pastor Harris and Pastor Dodge. And so I've actually been able to glean a lot of knowledge in my time in Pathfinders, so that when I'm talking about Pathfinders, I'm able to answer as many questions as possible. And the other thing is being willing to say you don't know the answer, and I'll get back with you on that. Having that humility is important as well. So the next thing we need to look at is knowing your location. Okay, are you in a church? That's going to dictate how you do your worship. Obviously, we're in a church, right? Well, you guys are in a church. I'm at home, but we're in a church setting. And so we have the ability to have a multimedia, excuse me, a multimedia presence where I can do this stream in from my house and still have a slideshow presentation. We have these abilities in this church. Are you going to be around a campfire? Then you don't have a microphone, and you got to be able to project your voice. You're going to have the crackling of the fire, and if it's a big enough fire, it's very distracting, especially later in a weekend. You guys know how Saturday nights are around a fire. The kids kind of look like zombies. So Saturday night, Sunday morning, they're kind of sitting there just staring at the fire. And now you're trying to have a devotional thought with them. Are they really there with it? So you need to tailor your worship services to your location. Also, with a campfire, what kind of music are you going to be able to have? At a church, you can have recorded music playing over the speakers. You can have pretty much anything you want done at a church. Whereas at a camp out, you're limited to what instruments you can bring with you, like a guitar or a trumpet or uh, worst thing I've ever heard on a camp out was the Owasso satellites when I was a companion. They had two kids that could play the bagpipes. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, it sounded like a bunch of geese were being strangled. What'd you say? So, um, yeah, it was, I that was when I had developed my disdain for the bagpipes. But you need to know what kind of instruments you can use around the campfire. Are you going to be at a personal, at your house or at the deputy director's house, pastor's house? And is it going to be like the picture there where everyone's just kind of around a fire, but there's, wood accessible, camp chairs, picnic table? Is it going to be a more comfortable setup in your house? Are you going to, like when I was a kid in Pullman, the pastor would actually have a youth group meeting in his living room. So there you have another, set of uh, advantages and challenges. So I don't know how many of you are actually really good at paying attention when you're sitting on a couch, but I would be very quick to nod off and fall asleep if I was sitting on a couch and someone's home and they're trying to have a worship thought. So that's something to consider. Um, are you on a bus going somewhere? Because we're about to embark on a 2 day journey. Most of us are going to take 2 days to get there. Granted, Brenda and I being truckers, we could, if we wanted to, really put our shoulder to the wheel and knock out the entire trip in one run, one stretch. But most people can't do that. And so we're going to be looking at a 2 day run. Are we going to, we're going to have worships on the bus and we're going to be um, even more limited. You don't want a bunch of instruments on the bus. Most of your instruments are going to be under the bus or in the storage in the back or in the trailer or, excuse me, or wherever your instruments are going to be at. So you're limited to maybe a ukulele and your voices. If you have someone that can play a ukulele, you got to really look at where you're going to be. Are you by a lake? I know it's always a lot of fun to go to the campfire point there at Camp Asable and you sing, I think it's the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And you get to the point when you yell and then the whole song stops and you see how many times you can echo across the lake when you sing. Um, no, it's Hold the Fort. Hold the Fort is the one we always did when I was a kid. But anyway, so that's a huge thing. Also, if you're at the lake, you look at the time of day. Is it dark? Is the only light you have the campfire? Um, are the kids falling asleep? Are your adults sitting back in their reclining camp chairs, sawing logs, and you're trying to talk over them snoring? There's a lot of things that you have to take into consideration just by looking at your location. The next thing is your multimedia. Are you going to use your technology available to you? So, like we have here, PowerPoint. I'm able to go through and develop all these points on the computer with pictures and cool transitions for all the slides and the different points coming up, and it kind of adds a new dimension. So you're not just looking at me the whole time. That would be 4 hours of looking at me. Even my wife doesn't want to do that. So it gives you an opportunity to give your audience something else to look at. Um, do you want to do just a slideshow, not like a PowerPoint presentation, but are you going to do an end of year review? Do you want to be the person standing up in the front of the church doing an end of year review, just talking? Or do you want to have a slideshow where you can sit in the front seat, the front pew, and look at the slideshow that everyone else is looking at and just kind of commentary on it? Are you going to have a video in your worship? I know my family likes to watch a program called, what's that one here? I don't know. I forgot what it's called. She's going to think of it while I'm talking. So there's a place out of Australia. The guy's name is Gary Kent, and he does like 28-minute, 27-minute um, worship thoughts on different things, kind of like Dr. Adkins does. The Incredible Journey is what it's called. Yeah. And he does these. One of them was on the Cadbury chocolate factory. Another one was on Isaac Semmelweis with the bacteria and mothers' uh, mortality rates with births, and they went up when they were washing hands. And so he has these little worship services that are we really enjoy for a Sabbath afternoon is to watch one or two of those. So are you going to have a video as part of your worship service? Behind the scenes, if you ever want to really talk to Brandon about what he's got going on with this program we have here and all the behind the scenes, that's something you have to consider. I have Brandon, so that's a huge blessing. He's taking care of everything with the video, the live stream, me coming in like this on my computer, and the making sure we have the audio set up, everything he does. I couldn't even tell you everything he does because he just makes it happen. So we can actually take a moment here and give Brandon a round of applause for all that he does to help us from behind the scenes. All right, now we're going to look at our internet connection. That was something we were kind of struggling with today. We have to make sure, I know in Hillsdale, if we're going to have to do something on the internet, we have to plan way in advance. Like if we're going to do the we were going to show that movie about the dinosaurs. Well, we had to make sure we had to download it to our computer when we had good internet at home, so that when we went to the church, we weren't relying on the spotty internet at the church in Hillsdale. So you got to take into consideration your internet connection if that's something you're going to need to use. And then your hardware. So, you know, we have the TV set up there in front and the computer attaching to it. Do we have an HDMI cable to connect those? Are we able to cast the presentation to a TV from a tablet? You know, knowing what you have to use and what is at your disposal while you're doing a multimedia presentation. Things you need to think about when you're doing a worship service. Next slide is there a predetermined theme? We run into this at like camporees where usually our themes are pretty broad. Like this one we have, for an example, is believe the promise. Now, those of us that have done worships for years, we can take that and run with it. There is a lot of promises we can work with that are in the scripture. We can do personal stories about how we've claimed the promises in the Bible and how that has affected our lives. So we can really work with that. And I've found that the conference has been really good about giving us very broad topics, and then we can really hone in on individual thought worship processes. We need to stay on topic though, because it's so easy to rabbit trail, especially for me. My wife and kids will attest. I can be talking about one thing, and then before you know it, I'm kind of like YouTube, where you have the focus, and then before you know it, you're talking about giraffes for some reason. So you got to be careful about your rabbit trails and staying on topic and keeping your time limited. Use pertinent scripture, okay? The key word there is pertinent. It needs to pertain to your topic. You can't just grab a random scripture that you like and try and tie it in. Too many pastors do that, where they grab scriptures that really don't have a lot to do with the topic, and you just let it sitting there scratching your head. And we're adults scratching our heads going, what on earth is he talking? Why did he bring this up? How does this tie in? What about these poor 10-year-olds, these fifth graders that are like, yeah, that I don't see how that works. And as soon as you do something like that, you've lost them. You might only be a minute into your worship service, but you do something that was totally unpertaining to your worship thought, and you've lost them. They're fifth graders, you know. They're not really going to be trying to track you. You got to think through your own topic when you're doing a worship service. So let's go to our next one: desired level of involvement. Okay, this is could be considered mildly controversial, but when you think about it in the context of kids and today's society and the ease of access to um, the internet and everything just flashing right in front of their eyes, we have to look at our worships and kind of look at it as a bit of a performance. So we are, as those up front, performers. Pastor is a performer. If you're up doing special music, you're performing. If you're doing children's story, it's a performance. You're telling a story. Obviously, we're not Van Halen or something actually pulling off a concert, but we are still performers. So maybe a theater class would actually help with storytelling, or like we did the Christian storytelling honor. We could pick up a lot of uh, good information from Pastor Harris on that. Yeah, that was actually, I really enjoyed that presentation. That was really cool. So we also need to decide what level of involvement we want from our participants. So this picture on the right here is of a mime that works at SeaWorld. And as you see, he likes to, between shows, interact with people going through, coming in for the show, leaving the show. And his level of involvement as a mime is to really interact with the people. Otherwise, he doesn't have anything to do. Do we want our Pathfinders to be doing a song service? Do we want our Pathfinders to be telling the worship story thought? Do we want, how involved are we going to have our worship? Are we going to do a scavenger hunt? Really think about how involved you want your audience to be for that worship. Do you have to do everything in a worship program? Absolutely not. You can delegate. In fact, like we talked about just this last seminar, the Pullman Reflectors did the entire evangelistic series. My dad just sat back and did behind the scenes stuff. It was the Pathfinders that did everything. So if you have a Pathfinder that is really good about getting up and having a good, complete worship thought, clear, concise, complete, uh, let them do a worship thought. In fact, a lot of our classworks, they have to do a worship thought of sorts. So not only are you doing them, but you're teaching your young people how to have worships and to conduct worship. So you don't have to be the one up front all the time. As the director, generally you have to call the meeting to order and all that. But as far as worships, I know Brandon has the added blessing of having Daniel come in as the club. Trying to think of the chaplain. Thank you, Brandon. The club chaplain, and he's responsible for doing all the worships, and that's a huge weight off his shoulders. And the chaplain can also be responsible for working with outreach, which is another huge weight off of the director's shoulders. So you don't have to be the one to do everything during a worship service. Encourage peer support. So one thing that we've always had trouble with our Pathfinders is getting peer support. So one thing we started doing when I was a kid was if we would have a Pathfinder Sabbath and it came time for a children's story, one of the kids was doing the children's story. If there was one, maybe two kids going up the rest of the Pathfinder Club would then go run up to the front and sit in the front pews and be there for the children's story. They would collect the offering. The Pathfinders would step up and encourage their fellow Pathfinders who are doing the children's story. And then when Pathfinders are talking to their friends, they're a lot more comfortable up front. So encourage that peer support. Okay. Encourage, like, when there's a special music or there's a song service, encourage there to be some very boisterous involvement with song service. Really encourage your kids to sing along. Well, not as loud as they can because that can get quite obnoxious, but very enthusiastically. Again, it goes back to, as staff, we're enthusiastic. We're singing, we're having a good time. We got our TLTs that are singing, having a good time. They're enthusiastic, and the kids will follow suit. So encourage the peer support. Our next slide, assess the topic for enthusiasm. Oh, that is one of the hardest things as a leader, is to present a topic and assess, are you yourself enthusiastic about that topic? Because it's very hard to present something if your heart's not in it. That's why Dr. Adkins always has a really great nature nugget, because he's into that. He's a biologist. It's his thing to talk about nature. So he's always got a good presentation, and he's been doing it long enough. He's learned other tricks to be a presenter and, frankly, a performer in a way. So he's always has the enthusiasm for his own presentation. And then the rest of us, our peer support, we're enthusiastic. So we're spreading that onto our TLTs. We spread it onto the Pathfinders. So nature nuggets are always actually a very popular time for Pathfinder worships. Now you have to look at audience enthusiasm, like the picture on the right. Are you going to lose your audience? You have to constantly reassess during your presentation. You can see it on their faces. Are they drifting off? Are they totally uninterested? And have you lost them, or are they leaning on the edge of their seats? I tell a story around the campfire that my wife and mother-in-law despise. We call it the doink maker. And I can tell that for a week, like hour or two each night around the campfire. And I can tell that for a week long. And I know that nobody has lost interest other than my wife and mother-in-law, that they don't lose interest for a week because of the story, because of the storyline, the way I tell it, all these things. I'm watching, and they're always sitting at the front of their seats waiting for the next thing that's going to happen in the story. And then you need to figure out how you can create enthusiasm. We've talked about that quite a bit here. Are you excited about it? Are your staff members sitting there attentively in the worship program, or are they out doing their own thing while your chaplain or you are doing the worship service? As far as like peer support, that's also our staff members. Our TLTs need to be there, need to be attentive, and need to be a part of the program, singing along, encouraging others to sing for song service, just really having a strong support system. And again, as a presenter, being able to keep your audience's attention. Next one is preparation and practice. So you need to develop a program, whether you're going to have singing, scripture readings, etc. You need to have your presentation ready, and you need to figure out what you want all involved in it. Are you going to do a walk, and they have to do an object lesson as they pick up something from nature during the walk? You need to figure out what your program is going to be from start to finish. Prepare any visual aids you're going to need. Or like Dr. Adkins, he'll have something from the Nature Center he'll bring over, and it'll be a visual aid. Are you going to have a video, multimedia? You know, get all your visual aids prepared. Proofread it. So when I go through a presentation like this, I actually hand it off to my wife, and she proofreads everything, makes sure that there's proper grammar, proper spelling. Um, she helps me because sometimes things flow well in my head that don't necessarily flow well in the presentation. So when she looks at it, if she can kind of follow along, even though I'm not actually presenting it to her, if she can follow the train of thought, then it's pretty good. So she's my proofreader for a presentation. If you don't have someone that can proofread for you, you might want to put your presentation together, and then the next day, after you've had time to sleep, read it again. That way you don't have the presentation running in your head. You've had time for it to kind of rest in your brain, and then you can go back through and try and proofread it. You might catch some spelling errors, some grammar errors, or things like that. But make sure you proofread it. Um, the same thing. Have a trusted friend proofread it. Again, my wife. She's my proofreader. If I do anything, I write a paper, a book, or do a presentation like this, I hand it to her, and she reads through it. Plus, she's a bit of a grammar Nazi. She likes the she could be an English professor if she just wanted to. And then practice. There's nothing wrong with standing in front of a mirror and practicing. Do I stand in front of a mirror to practice? No, I do not. Mostly because the mirrors in my house are set at my wife's height, and I can see from about my mustache down. So it doesn't really benefit me in any way to stand in front of a mirror. But you can practice your presentation. Look at yourself. Are you portraying enthusiasm? Are your inflections in your talking working right? Are they following the story? Um, Run through it 3, 4, 5 times. Make too many worships. Okay. Have an emergency worship program. So one thing I've done a few sermons here and there, and I actually have a few sermons that are tucked away in my Bible, where if I needed to, I could pull them out. And yeah, there's no PowerPoint presentation, but I could present a sermon based off of what's sitting in my Bible right now, just in the front sleeve. I've had to do that. We had it was a camp meeting in Hillsdale did not close for the camp meeting, but they didn't prepare anybody to give a sermon, and we didn't have the capability of playing the worship from camp meeting on the screen in the church. So we showed up to church, and there was like 7 or 8 people there, but we had nobody to give a sermon. And so one of the other deacons and myself, we just kind of became the elders and the pastor, and we just ran everything. And I just happened to have in my Bible a Bible study that I had kind of built into a bit of a presentation. And I used my training with the PIA, excuse me, the PIA training I've had to develop a decent presentation, and I had a impromptu sermon, sorry. So always have something kind of in your back pocket, especially as Pathfinder leaders. You might be called on at a moment's notice to present. When I went to teach knots at workshop, I wasn't asked months in advance. I wasn't asked a week in advance. It was something where I got to workshop, and some of you may have remembered this, but there was a tragedy where some of the Pathfinders and their parents were in car accidents, and there was this massive issue. And one of the area coordinators, who was, I believe it was Sergio, They were his pathfinders in his church, his club, and he had to get back and be supportive to the family. And the kids were he was close with the kids, and so he had to leave. And they didn't have anybody to teach the knot honor for Sunday. So Pastor Harris from the front asked, "Hey, is there anybody that could teach this on Sunday? If not, we're just going to have to cancel that particular honor." So I went up to the front and I said, "Hey, you know what? I've done this for years. I could teach this honor." So the next day, Sabbath, he and I went over to the pavilion and dug up some ropes, and I had my wife helping me, and we just kind of did a spur of the moment kind of impromptu knot honor teaching, teaching how to do the knot honor, and it actually turned out quite well. But as Pathfinders, we have to be prepared, especially as staff members. We have to be prepared to step up and just pull a worship out of our back pocket. And if you've done the preparation and you have an emergency worship, you could step up and make it happen. Another thing that it's good for Pathfinders to have in their back pocket is a children's story. I've got, I think, 4 or 5 different stories that I just kind of hold on to so that if I'm at church and they're kind of just, they get to children's story, the kids are up there and the elders are looking around going, does anybody have a story? Well, then I raise my hand and say, yeah, I can tell a story. And if I use the same 5 stories, by the time I've actually told all 5 stories and get back around to the first one, it's a whole new set of kids. So they haven't heard the story before. So I keep my same 5 in my back pocket. So make sure that you prepare and you practice. And it seems like a lot of work to put together a worship, but if you want an effective and meaningful worship that could essentially change a kid's life, you have to put some thought into it. You have to prepare, and it'll go smoother for you. In these presentations that I'm doing right now, I take the time to prepare and to practice and to proofread and get it ready to go so that when I come before you guys, it's pretty straightforward. We just follow the slideshow and we can talk. You guys can ask all the questions you want to ask, and we just keep it flowing. So preparation is key. So next slide, do we have any questions? Okay, our next one for tomorrow morning will be communication, theory and practice. This is an interesting one. It could go on for actually communications one that could go on for days. There are entire marriage counseling things that could last for weeks just on communication. So we are not going to do that. I'm going to try to keep it to about an hour, well, between a half hour to an hour. We'll see how it goes. But lately, the last couple of seminars have been about 45 minutes. So we're going to try and keep it right in there. So thank you guys for coming out. We're going to be meeting at, I believe, 9 o'clock. Isn't that right, Brandon? Yep, 9 o'clock, excuse me, tomorrow morning will be the first seminar, and we're going to cover 3 of them tomorrow. Let's have a quick word of prayer to close this out, and then we'll see if Brandon has any other announcements or anything. So let's bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you again for bringing us all together today, whether it be in person or remotely. We thank you for the ability, the knowledge, and the skills that you've given so many people to develop this technology for us to all be here together. We pray that you will be with us as we go to our separate places tonight, whether it's home or to a friend's house or wherever we're staying this weekend. We pray that you will keep us safe as we travel, and we pray that you will help us to retain as much of this information as possible so that we can best serve you by serving your young people. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so thank you all for coming and have a good time. If you need your seminar signed off, Brandon can do that. So if you want to come up and bug him for the last 5 seminars, feel free. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.